On this episode, I sat down with Christine Seager, who is a trauma nurse turned life coach. She and I discuss burnout and overwhelm and the difference between the two. And the reason why I wanted to have her come on to Women Mastering Midlife is, when I say the title Women Mastering Midlife, it's an active verb. We haven't mastered. Nobody's gotten it all nailed down. And Christine really helps dig into overwhelm and burnout, which I feel is something that we are all experiencing in some way, shape, or form. So I hope that you can take away some tools, some knowledge on how to differentiate the two and avoid going into full-on burnout, and also knowing that she is a resource for you if this is something that you're experiencing. I hope you enjoy. Welcome to Women Mastering Midlife, where we dive deep into the rich complexities of womanhood in our middle years. I'm your host, Victoria Bird, pharmacist, certified women's health coach, and your guide on this transformative journey. Whether you're navigating perimenopause, thriving in menopause, or mastering midlife's many transitions, this is your weekly dose of expert guidance, compassionate support, and a judgment-free space to explore it all. So get cozy, hit that play button, and let's rewrite the narrative around this remarkable stage from being something to dread into a beautiful transition. Our guest today is someone who truly embodies the spirit of mastering midlife. Christine Seager is a professional life coach with a passion for guiding others toward living their most authentic and fulfilling lives. With a rich background in nursing and extensive training from the esteemed Academy of Coaching Excellence, Christine brings a unique blend of medical expertise and coaching mastery to her work. She is also an associate certified coach through the International Coaching Federation, ensuring the highest standards of professionalism. Through her engaging monthly online presentations, Christine covers an array of invaluable topics like setting audacious goals, mitigating stress, cultivating healthy boundaries, fostering collaborative communication, and guiding those feeling unsure of where to begin on their journey. But Christine's impact extends far beyond virtual presentations. She has hosted numerous workshops tailored specifically for small businesses understanding the nuanced dynamics and challenges entrepreneurs face. Her practical tools and insight empower companies to thrive. As a one-on-one coach, Christine creates a compassionate, judgment-free space where clients can find clarity, build confidence, and embrace the courage to manifest their dream lives. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome the wise, multi-talented Christine Seager to the show today.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here.
I'm excited to be doing this. So we connected through the brilliant social media platform, and we both saw a connection in what each other are doing and how we could complement each other. You actually reached out to me as part of your goal to connect with more people in the community to serve. And I've been following you ever since. I love what you're doing. I love what you offer people, both one-on-one and online. And so I wanted to bring you on this show because I feel like there's so many women out there who are experiencing overwhelm and burnout, and we're all just tired. And at this point of our life, I feel that, our hormones are taking control and making us more exhausted than normal. Our kids are really busy and active. And, post-pandemic, we're all coming out, and I feel like we're overscheduling ourselves because we're making up for lost time. So I think that this topic will really hit home for a lot of women. And I'm so excited to have you on here today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. And I agree. I think we're often pulled in so many different directions at once that absolutely having these conversations about burnout and overwhelm are helpful.
So as women, we do connect emotion to a lot of things in our lives. And I wanted to discuss with you today the emotional aspects of overwhelm and burnout. And if you could share a little bit on what you see as a coach.
Yeah. So I think one of the first things in general is that with either overwhelm or burnout, we have this sense of like failure or we're not doing right or well enough. And it's even hard for us to just start to identify that something's off or may not be feeling very well for us. Perhaps we need some help, or we need to just take a step back and get organized. For burnout, we might need to really just take a hard time out. But even just that very first step of having that awareness, because we're constantly on the go. We're like spinning, doing all the things, trying to keep all the plates in the air, and the kids moving in all the directions. And right, we can go on forever, all of the millions of things that we feel like we need to do. So we almost don't even identify that we have a problem in the first place. And even just admitting to ourselves, like, I think it's sometimes hard for us to admit to ourselves, like, we might need to take a pause or a stop or a timeout just to even assess where we are.
Yeah, absolutely. I know when those times are coming. I almost feel like I know in advance this week is going to be hectic, or this aspect of work or the kids' extracurricular activities is going to be hectic. And I don't even plan at that point. I just I know it's coming. And I think if I had some tools in play in advance of that, it might actually serve me better than, hitting that wall midweek and, imploding or exploding on the people around me as well. So I'm excited to have this conversation and hopefully take away some tips that'll help myself. My family will appreciate this conversation as well.
Yeah, so good.
So what do you consider the difference between burnout and overwhelm? Because even in talking with you, prepping for this conversation, I'm seeing more and more a difference.
Yeah. So burnout is when you really need to take a time out. You're absolutely just completely done. You can tell a pretty good difference when you're taking a look at the results. Like, are you still actually producing results? Are you still actually able to hang on and keep the things moving in the directions that they're going in? Are you clear about what you need to do or not? And like, how much do you care? To me, burnout is when we almost like don't even care at all. It feels a lot heavier than overwhelm. Overwhelm is when maybe the wheels are spinning and you're not getting traction, but burnout is like you're not even stepping on the gas. You just almost don't even care anymore. And really the best solution for burnout is to take a full time out. It's a time when you really need to just take a break. Maybe you're feeling burnt out on social media, or you're feeling burnt out on taking the kids to all the events, or you're feeling burnt out on the amount of work that you have to do. You might need to just take a time out and pause and step back from things. Burnout is really kind of like, I would say, like the triage level 3 of stepping into our busyness. And often before burnout is overwhelm. Overwhelm to me would be like a level 2. And overwhelm is when you're feeling like there's a lot of things to do, but there's more feeling confusion. You're not exactly sure what you should be doing and when. You don't know where to start, perhaps. You're unclear on your plan. And that's where, when you're saying too during the week that you should maybe plan in advance so that come midweek you're not already getting so overwhelmed, but that's where it's helpful. So often with my clients, they'll say that they're feeling overwhelmed, and it's because they're trying to do all of the things all at once instead of stepping back and asking yourself, like, what is the minimum required that I need to do here? What are the priorities? And for me, it always helps me to do a bit of a mind map where I can just write on my coaching board. Actually, I have a big write on my board that I use, but I just write out what are all the things that I'm expecting to do, that I'm expecting of myself, or that like my family is expecting me to do. And then once I have it even just out of my head, I can map it all out and see like, okay, where are the priorities? What is each little teeny tiny baby step to do? And then I get clarity with that. Like, do I really have to do all this? Can any of it be delegated out? What actually are the priorities? And maybe some things can just be taken off the list altogether. I have a great example. Actually, I was having company a couple of summers ago, and I felt overwhelmed because I wanted to have the house clean. And somebody was just like, well, okay, what does that entail? I'm like, well, I need to vacuum and dust and mop and all that kind of thing, but also like wipe the baseboards and wash the windows and just like every like little detailed thing. And I was like, it's not really true. Like, they're not going to notice that the windows are dirty, and it doesn't really matter that much. And it's kind of funny too, because my sister is the opposite of me, and she's like, oh, you just swish the toilets and it's good to go.
It is funny how our personalities can affect the level of overwhelm we feel. And, I was reading a book a couple of years ago about women and how our generation, especially, we were raised on the idea that we could have it all and be it all. We could be the mom and president of the United States, but nobody told us how to do it. And nobody told us it was okay to ask for help. And nobody told us it was okay to prioritize and let things go. So I feel, well, especially for me personally, I don't know if this is what you see with your clients, but I feel like I have to get everything done. It has to be perfect. I have to do it myself so that I can show everyone that I'm capable of doing it all. And I think as we get older, our resilience from stress decreases just because of, biologically, things are changing in our bodies that are affecting our resilience to stress. But we still have this idea that we have to be it all and we have to achieve it all and we can't have help. So then that overwhelm does tend to sink in. And you're saying that overwhelm leads to burnout. So when do you realize the difference? As a person, as a client coming to you, when I realize I've passed the point of overwhelm, burnout is where I am at.
It's usually when they really stop caring. Like if they have a business that they're trying to grow, or just even at their jobs, like a lot of my clients get burnt out on their 9 to 5. They just don't care. Like they're people that have good integrity and good intentions and want to do a good job. Like that's truly who they are. But they almost stop caring about their performance at work because they're just so over it. They really do check out. And that's the red flag for me, is when people are truly checked out. They're just going through the motions. They're doing the minimum required, but they're not even caring if they're doing a good job or not. And that's where it's like, okay, you need to really take a pause and disconnect. So often part of that too is that when we take a pause or like go on vacation, we don't actually disconnect. We're still checking our emails and we're still checking our phone. And it's like, okay, what are the processes and what can you do to set that up so that your staff or your people or coworkers or whatever it is operate without you?
Yeah. Okay. And then, for burnout, it doesn't mean you should just quit your job and you should just find something else and pivot.
Right. Yeah. It's taking a step back and seeing, kind of regrounding yourself and seeing what's truly important to you so that you can make a conscious decision about if you want to be staying there or not. So often people feel stuck and they feel trapped in their job, or they feel like there isn't anything else that they can do, so they have to stay there. But it's really like, let's take a step back and look, is this where you really want to be? Is this the job you actually want to have? Is this really what you want to be doing? And oftentimes clients are able to reconnect to that. Like, why were you doing this in the first place? And what is actually most important to you? And then what are the little steps that we can mitigate in between to keep you from burning out again in the future? But it's really that disconnection and taking that time out first that they need to rest. To me, burnout is like that extreme piece that you need to take some time to rest. And one thing that you mentioned that I want to circle back to is that piece of perfectionism. And so often that is the part that has us getting burned out. It's that everything has to be done just so. Everything has to be done in just the perfect right way. That is what leads us to be feeling overwhelmed and then leads us to burnout. Like, what is the bare minimum required that you can do here? What is something specific that you don't have to do at full tilt? And it's not to the detriment of anything else. It's just what is truly the minimum required.
Okay. So if you're looking from the perspective of a woman who's listening to this and she's in the throes of far too many things on her kids' plates, we say yes to everything because we feel like, I don't know about anybody else listening, but I definitely feel like with the pandemic and where we lived, everything shut down for a very long time. We were isolated. I felt like our state in particular was one of the last ones to open back up. So, schools were shut down. Dance was virtual. People weren't going over to people's houses. And so now I feel like I have to say yes to all the dance classes, all the sleepovers, all the basketball games and football games they want to go to, any concert they want to. I need to say yes to everything. And then I put it all on our plate. And, I have a husband that is helpful with driving after work hours, but during the day, it's all on me to get everything navigated and to get everyone where they need to be. And so how do we take saying yes to everything and figure that out to avoid overwhelm? And also, what do you suggest if we're in the middle of it? We've said yes to too many things, and now we need to stop and prevent the overwhelm from becoming burnt out, because we can't just check out of our families, unfortunately.
Sure. Yeah. So, one thing I would say that I see a lot in my clients too is they have kids going in too many different directions. So I would recommend the first thing I would do beforehand is to try to limit how many sports, for example, the kids are in. I know people that have their kids in 3 different sports or 4 different sports, and then they have like 3 kids. So they truly are going in too many different directions. And if you look at even like when the practices are, you almost physically can't get all the kids to all the things at the same time. So I would put a limit. I mean, it depends on how old your kids are, but you could have a conversation with them about like, you can do 2 sports, or you can do even 2 seasonal sports, right? Like 2 in the spring and 2 in the fall. What would you like for that to look like? And then collaborate with them. I also would maybe take a look at how many hours your family is spending out of the house a week. So making sure, of course, they have enough time for school, but how many sleepovers are they doing and how often and that sort of thing. So, and then taking turns, right? Anytime that we can work with other moms too, to help coordinate pickups and drop offs and that kind of thing is helpful. So I would say those are kind of some of the things to do before you get into the overwhelm to help to mitigate it. I also think we often believe that by putting some limits on our kids that we're doing them, that it's going to have a detrimental impact on them. So I think there's balance there. They don't have to be doing 5 sports, but they don't have to be doing like just 1 either. What is really truly going to be best for the kids? And as a family, that might be a discussion that you'll want to have together to see what the possibilities are. And then once you're in it, you asked what we could do once we're in the overwhelm to prevent us from going to burnout. And it might be having to say no sometimes. We struggle, broadly speaking, to say no, especially once we've made a commitment. But I think there's really not a problem in saying like, we're just not feeling this right now, or we're sorry that we made this commitment, but we really need to prioritize our health and well-being first for a minute, and trying to not overcommit beforehand. But yeah, sometimes it does happen. So we worry about what other people are going to think, but we also have to find that balance between what we assume that they're going to think and what's going to actually happen. So they're potentially going to be okay with it.
Okay. Yeah. And I think that's true, because I know if I have a friend or a fellow mom say, I thought this was going to work. I thought meeting up on Saturday was going to work, but I just didn't realize how many things we have on our plates and this is too much. Can we reschedule? I never even think twice. I'm like, oh yeah, sure. Like it's no big deal. Unless it's, non-refundable tickets to something, or, if it's a Taylor Swift concert, I might not be able to say, sure, we'll just reschedule that. But if it's, if it's just a sleepover or getting together for lunch, it's okay to say, I've got too much on my plate, because if you think about your response to other people, it's pretty typically what you would hope from the other person anyway. So.
Exactly. Yeah. That's also another point too, is like being tired. So I always think, if Taylor Swift knocked on your door and was like, hey, I have free tickets for you and your family to come to my concert wherever in the world, you have to be ready in an hour. Like, could you get up and get, not that you're down, but could you get your family packed up and ready to go in that hour, even when you're feeling so tired? Like there's a balance in there too of like, are you actually really tired? If you had this amazing opportunity, could you take advantage of it? Or is it just like you're feeling that you're tired and you could actually rally to do things too?
That's true. And then you start to wonder, is it really something I should have said yes to in the first place? Like if you're not really willing to pull yourself up off the couch or to, get yourself out of the house to go to XYZ, then should you really have ever said yes?
I really tried to pay attention to what my future self is going to think if I make a commitment in advance. Am I really going to want to do this? Do I want to do this tomorrow? Right? Because some people we always use the baking cookies for a cookie sale. That's the example. But if someone asks you to bake something, in a month from now, do you want to do that tomorrow? Because if you don't want to do it tomorrow, you're not going to want to do it in a month from now either.
That's true. That makes a lot of sense, because there are a lot of times that you will say, sure, I'll do that. And then you even turn around in that instant and you're groaning at having just said yes. So taking stock of that, I think is something we all need to be a little bit better about. And so if I came to you as a client saying, especially let's use the example of, I run a social media account. I'm an entrepreneur on social media and I just can't do it anymore. I'm not looking at it. I have totally shut social medias off. I haven't posted in a month. how do you help somebody deal with that burnout enough to where they want to go back? Because this was initially their passion project. It's something that they love initially. How do you get them to a place where they're finding that passion again?
Well, I would help them connect to their goal in the first place. Like, what is it that they really want to accomplish? Why did they want to do this in the first place? Like for me, for coaching, I don't love posting on social media, but I really want to add value and help people. So for me, when I struggle with it, I just have to connect to the people that I'm helping and the people that I wouldn't be helping by not showing up. So when I can connect myself to that, then it makes it a little bit easier for me. So that's the mindset piece. And then there is the action piece, which is, okay, and I did actually get kind of burned out on social media. I don't know, I think about a month and a half ago or so. And I was like, what are the parameters, like the bumpers that I can establish for myself to make this be an easier process? I do want to show up. I want to show up for people. I want to add value. So how do I want to do that? And for me, it was to stop scrolling altogether. I unfollowed people that I found myself comparing myself to because I was going too easily into compare and despair. Funny enough, it was under the guise, and that's air quotes, of doing research to see like how else is someone else doing it. But then I was finding myself comparing. So I stopped following a whole bunch of people. I do purposefully curate my feed. And then I also have clear parameters about how often I want to show up and how, because I do sometimes still worry about the implication of social media on our younger generation. And so for me, I stopped using filters. I was like, I want kids to see, this is what I look like in real life. And if they ran into me on the street, like I want them to be like, yes, that still looks like Christine. So I set a protocol about how I want to show up. That's just a couple of examples of what that would be. But really helping them to, after they've had some good rest and are able to kind of have separated themselves from whatever it is that's causing them to burn out, in this case, social media, then I would ask, like, even, is that something that you want to still do? Is there another way that you want to show up for your people? What is it that is most important to you? And then we just start there.
Okay. You bring up a good point about authenticity. And have you found with your clients that when they veer away from their authentic selves, they tend to become more burnt out quickly?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's primarily when we're trying to be something that we feel like we're not, or that there's one right way to do something. That comes up a lot in coaching also. Like, I have to do it this way, but that's not really me. And like I call it the square peg round hole thing. We're trying to be something that we're not. It's just really not working out. And women can do really hard things. So we're just so persistent and just trying to like jam the peg in there so much that we almost don't even realize that we're doing it. But that's something to take a look at. I almost forgot your question.
That's okay.
Oh, authenticity. Yes.
Yes. Authenticity.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just easier. We can still do things when we're trying to do it the right way and it's not in alignment with our authenticity, but it just becomes so much easier when we're able to tap into what that is and what it looks and feels like. It becomes easier to show up in that way. And then yes, burnout is less likely to occur.
Yeah, I do think that for me, with the example of social media, it's sometimes a necessary evil, but I feel like those trends that everybody is following on social media, the 7-second clips with the funny dances or the voiceovers. And I know myself particularly, everyone was teaching you, if you want to make connections, if you want to have visibility, you have to do these things. And the more I saw myself making silly 7-second reels of voiceovers, I just thought, this isn't the professional way I want to put myself out there. This isn't the way I want to connect to people. And so I totally shut off. I stopped doing it altogether and then had this massive gap of doing anything. And so I feel like if I had talked to you and worked through, just some ways to avoid even getting to that point and sticking true to what I feel is important to put out there into the world versus what that world expects of you, I think that helps too.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not so much of a trend follower by nature anyway. Like I think about clothes or fashion or like whatever is the new thing. I don't really participate in that anyway. And so same for social media. I mean, I'm going to show up what in a way that feels best for me. And the one thought that really kind of grounded me when I was in that also was that I really want to put more good out into the world. And I really want to put more good out onto social media also. So how do I want to show up? That's in a way that feels good to me. And sure, it might potentially be at the cost of more followers or more eyes on it. I guess technically it could be tied to money. I personally don't exactly see it that directly, but it really is just what is your objective and reason for showing up online and how do you want to do it? I firmly believe there is no one right way to do something. If we were trying to reach 18-year-old kids, then for sure I'd be singing and dancing some more, but like that's not my audience. That's not who I'm trying to get in front of. And I'm okay with that. There's a whole bunch of other younger people that are willing to do that and great, good for them.
More power to them.
Yeah, exactly.
So for the moms, the stay-at-home moms who listen to these conversations, the women who aren't necessarily, in the thick of a career or aren't trying to be entrepreneurs online, when you reach the stage of burnout, how can you step back when it's your family? How do you make those boundaries when you're still caring for children and a spouse or a partner?
I think we have to ask for help. I mean, there's really pretty much no way to do it. And, we kind of joke when mom is sick, like the world doesn't stop for the sick mom. She has to keep going. And that's true. But there comes a point in time where we just really and truly have to ask for help. It's not always comfortable. And again, we feel like we shouldn't have to, but that's just not reality. Nobody can do everything on their own. So having some self-grace and some acceptance that this is just where we are. And another part of that too is like, technically we don't have to do anything. Like this thought is freeing actually. And I would never like necessarily do it. And when I was raising my stepdaughter, I was responsible for picking her up for school, but I was like, I don't actually technically have to go get you from school. Like all of it is optional. And when you're sick or if you have like serious, like maybe terminal illness or something like that, God forbid, I don't wish that on anyone, but those are times where not everything is going to get done. So that's what brings it back to like, what is truly the minimum requirement? Like the kids maybe have to go to school, but then not do the sports or maybe not even necessarily school. Like what is really and truly the very, very bare minimum of the things that need to get done. And if you need help getting those things done too, then call for reinforcement. There's girlfriends, like we worry about putting more work onto other people, but I know like you can call your girlfriend. If she called you and was like, hey, I need help with my kids, you can make that phone call and reach out to people. You call friends, you can call, whoever you have in your circle, right? And I have coached with people who are like, but I don't even have a circle. Like I have no support. There is really and truly no one around. And I'm like, but if you look at in your phone, like I literally actually made her take out her phone. I'm like, take out your phone and look at your contacts list. Like find me 10 people on your contacts that you could call. And she went through one by one and was like, okay, this is a client and that's a client and that's a client. Okay, no, but this person, might be able to help or that friend might be able to come over. So there are people that are willing and able to help. It's often our own discomfort in calling and asking for that help.
That's so true. When working with clients, I have a web of support sheet I ask them to fill out. And there have been times when it comes back blank. And I think, we discussed, is this really, you really have absolutely no one on your web of support that if the sky was falling, you wouldn't make one single phone call. And when diving into it and say, in dire circumstances, zombie apocalypse, Mount Rainier blows its top, who are you calling in a crisis to get your kids? If you're, if the road is shut down and you physically can't go, you have to call someone. Who is that? And then we start to break down the ideas of, I can't ask anyone for help. And it's so amazing how many women are they're stuck with the idea that they can't get help from anyone because they can't ask.
I mean, and for our clients, for you and me both, I'm always like, well, you have one because you could call me. And they're like, oh yeah, I didn't even think of that. I'm like,
and I could talk you through, if I don't live near you, I could talk you through who we're going to call to go pick up your kids or to get your groceries. And also just things of, where can you simplify? Do you Instacart your groceries to save yourself that hour at the grocery store? Because we all need food, but are there ways you could get it to you? Could you even do a click list where you order online and you go pick it up and you're not spending an hour going through the grocery store? So I think those are all really good ways for us to start thinking backwards about our day and how we can, shave off that time so that we aren't feeling so overwhelmed. I particularly know, from 9 to 2, the time is pretty much my time minus the occasional orthodontist appointment or doctor's appointment I need to take a kid to. But after 2:00, my time stops belonging to me. And I think when you start to feel like your time doesn't belong to you is when that overwhelm gets really overwhelming. Have you heard that from your clients?
Yes. And I think that it's great that you even have your own time from 9 to 2. Like some people that I work with don't even have that time. I'm assuming that's your work time primarily, but it's the grace within that it's all choices that people find a lot of relief around. So we don't technically have to cook for our kids. We don't technically have to bring them to sports. We don't technically have to take our parents to doctor's appointments, like all the things that we as women, all the expectations that we put on ourselves, that we have for ourselves. A really, really powerful exercise I did in the past year or so, I think it was last summer, was to write a list of all the expectations that I have for myself. And it was like, could have been probably pages long, but I mean, everything that I do from when I wake up in the morning to when I go to bed at night, I've seen like jokes and memes about it, but like a woman says she's going to bed and that means that she's like emptying the dishwasher, feeding the dog, checking their water, like so many things. And not to be gender specific, because I think this is not necessarily true, but like other people say that they're going to bed and then they just like straight go to bed. So really breaking down the expectations that we have for ourselves, for one, just looking at it on paper was profound for me because I was like, yeah, no wonder I'm feeling so overwhelmed. These are all the things that I think that I should be doing on a daily basis. And then seeing like, is it true? Do I really have to be the person doing all of this? Is it only me that can do these things? Are there other people that can help do these things? What sort of slack as your kids grow? What other things and what slack can your kids pick up as they get older? They can take on more responsibilities. What things can you delegate to other people, to them? Is there anything that you can eliminate that you can take off the list altogether? I mean, this is like common business things, but delegate, eliminate, and automate. So like where in your family business, I do look at running a household as a business. Actually, that's just because that's my mindset and where it goes. But what other things can you eliminate from your list altogether? And then is there the ability to automate anything also? Maybe I don't see automation so much in families per se, but I mean, maybe a set pick up and drop off schedule would be helpful and that kind of thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. And the delegating, I think, not only to your partner, because sometimes I feel like, my time expectations versus my spouse's time expectations outside the home are vastly different. And so in that, I also would like to be considerate of his time to decompress, do his, things that he enjoys, find time for, things that give him rest and recovery. And then also time for myself for rest and recovery and to get all the things done that needed to be done. Trying to balance that and find that equilibrium where one partner is out of the home significantly more than the other. What would you suggest? Because I feel like there can be friction sometimes when you start to ask for more. And especially, I'll use myself as an example. I'll be vulnerable. So when the kids were younger and my husband was starting his practice, his job, I took everything on myself, all the housework, all the child rearing, the nap schedule, the food, you name it. All he had to do was get up and go to work. And he didn't put that on me. I 100% put that on myself. But then I created this schedule of life for us that then created a situation where now if I start to ask for more, I've already set the groundwork of I do everything. So how do you connect with your partner, your spouse, about asking for more help when you've made yourself the bearer of all responsibility and now you want more help? What are some ways you suggest your clients to kind of broach that subject?
Yeah. Well, for one thing, I mean, I think it's important to even just identify that things can change just because that was the way it was before. And it sounds, were you maybe not working at that time?
No, I wasn't. Not out of the home.
So that right there is a huge difference in your time. And by your, I mean both you and your spouse. So things do change and things can change. And I really think I'm laughing at myself because coaching isn't necessarily giving advice, but what I would advise in this circumstance, because you asked, is to really just kind of sit down and be like, I really love collaborative communication process. So it's really just sitting down, first asking your spouse, like, when might be a good time to talk about this? I would say to my husband, I feel overwhelmed and I could use your help. When would be a good time for us to talk about it? And so that way I'm like letting him pick a time, like, okay, I hear that we're going to have kind of a bigger conversation, not just like, what are we having for dinner or something. So having him on board with having that conversation, it would be the first step. And then really just mapping out, like, here is where I'm struggling and here's where I'm spending my time. And this is where I'm struggling. What do you suggest? So part of the collaborative communication process is asking him for solutions. Like, this is where I'm trying to think of a specific example I had recently, but just, the overwhelm. Like, I feel overwhelmed. Here's all the things that I have on my plate. Do you have any solutions or what can you suggest? And often my spouse will take the ball and be like, I can do this, this, and this. Or we'll like map it out together and like, you're feeling overwhelmed about this, this, and this, but this has to be on you only. Like, I was going to travel one time to see my family. Like, that wasn't anything he could help me with. It was up to me to get everything together for me, but how they can pick up the slack. And you said how to connect with your partner. Yeah. And it's really another very key part to collaborative communication is not coming at them. Right? Especially like if you can pick a time where you're not overwhelmed in that moment and just stay like calm, cool, and collected yourself as much as possible, being okay with the fact that you're going to need help, not having that expectation that you can do all the things on yourself. It helps us to stay more calm and like, I'm thinking level and even keeled to even have that conversation. And then just being super curious to see what it is that they can suggest. Where will they be able to do some things, and clearly mapping out what the time frames and the time expectations would look like would be what I would suggest.
So basically, don't come at them when you're ready to, like, when you're so overwhelmed, you're ready to just explode.
Yeah. Try to come at it like sooner. Right. And if you're at the time of, and again, that's when, I mean, really, I think moms need time. I do. Moms need timeouts too. So if I'm in it at that moment and I'm about to blow a gasket, I'm going to just call a timeout and go step away. My stepdaughter is 24, so age is not an issue. But even when she was little, I mean, when she was little, it was different. When kids are younger and they're in that toddler age, I married her dad when she was 5. So same thing, actually very similar to you. I was working, but I worked in the morning. I was home off work by about 2:30, and I was doing the whole parenting thing the weeks that we had her. Fortunately, we got along well with her mom and that worked great. But the weeks that we had her, he was working until 8 or 8:30, and he would come home from work and I would basically hand her to him and be like, here, take your child. So, because I just was trying to have everything perfect. Like, I thought I had the expectation that she should be homeworked and fed and bathed and, basically tied up with a neat little bow on her head, ready for bed and ready to play and hang out with dad before she went to bed, actually, as soon as he came home. And like, it was impossible. And our ratio, I always think of like the parent to child ratio, was 1-to-1. So, really, I thought I should have been able to handle one child, but it was hard. It just definitely was not something I was able to do gracefully. So it's just lowering those expectations. Like, what is the bare minimum? She's alive. She's fed, maybe not the best food, it's whatever. It doesn't really matter.
And the expectation wasn't your husband's, it was Correct. What you were putting on yourself.
100%. Yeah. Isn't that interesting? But that's where we bring it down. And like she knew she was loved. Like that's really my expectation was she knows that we all love and care about her. And that was it. Like that is really
and we
all
don't
that's
necessarily
required.
Yeah, you don't need that perfect package to show that you're loving and that you care about her, which is another thing we could talk about that for another hour.
Yeah, for sure.
That's all.
But yeah, isn't it interesting though? Those expectations that we put on ourselves are really and truly what leads to that overwhelm and burnout.
Oh, 100%. And the more we talk, the more I think of all of these examples of when I put myself in precarious situations that were going to lead to overwhelm. And I should have seen it coming. And I might have even seen it coming, but ignored it anyway. And so when you're working with clients to prevent the overwhelm and burnout in the future, what are some things that you suggest, some tips for self-awareness that you give them or ways that you guide them to figure out in their lives when they're going to approach that overwhelm and burnout?
Yeah. Well, the thought I was thinking for you too, and all those examples that you're thinking of as we're talking is I'm curious what the underlying thoughts are that you had that were leading you to feeling, and as I'm saying that, I'm thinking for myself too, like what was the thought? I'll use myself. So what was the thought that I was having when Tara was little and I wanted her to be all tied up? And it was that I thought that's what was required of me in order to be a good wife, right? And a good mom. So breaking down those thoughts is really like, what are you actually thinking? What is the underlying thought or cause for these expectations and for the things that we're trying to do? And then is that true? So I teach my clients to have the awareness. It's one to be in the awareness of when you're starting to get overwhelmed. So like for me, I feel things in my body and overwhelm catches my breath and is like this, I lean back and I draw away from it and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't want that. So when I notice that in my body, then what am I thinking? Okay, I'm thinking I have too much to do. What are all the things? Why do I feel like I need to do this? I just help them kind of break down all the thoughts and feelings that they're having to mitigate the feelings of overwhelm.
Yeah, awareness can be such a good thing for us. And I think as a parent, when you were talking about like what drives you, I know for me personally, I had a career before I decided to stay home and raise our kids. I was a pharmacy manager for a busy retail pharmacy chain, and there were set expectations and parameters around my job and metrics I could meet. But with parenting, there's no parameters, there's no metrics, there's no guideline. And so I do recall at one point in the beginning of staying home, just sobbing to my husband saying, could you please give me like an annual review or something? Like, could you tell me how I'm doing?
I can relate to that. Yeah.
As a spouse and mom, because I felt like there's no reward at the end of it and there's no report card and you have no idea until they're off and on their own. Can they, are they well-rounded people? Can they support themselves? Are they contributing members of society? Those are all long-term, like those are long games. And you don't know in the thick of it what's going to turn out with the way you're doing things and taking care of your family. So I definitely feel like that's an easy way to get overwhelmed because you don't have that set expectation. When I was in a pharmacy, it was how many prescriptions are you filling? What is your error rate? What are your staffing hours? Are you, maximizing your payroll, but not going over? Those are things that I could manage till the cows came home. But when it came to, am I getting the kids to bed on time? Am I feeding them the right things? Am I playing with them enough or socializing them enough? There's so many things that could go right or wrong. And there's no parameters that we could base it off of. It's so ambiguous.
Yeah. So that's where I would say like to define it for yourself. Like what is really and that's what I keep coming back to the bare minimum required, but like what are the things that you can do to check the boxes at the end of your day? And I see a lot of similarity between parenting and entrepreneurship because the same thing with like solopreneurs like you and I, like we're it. So we get to define like what creates a good day and what is going to be enough for us to get through our day to feel like we've done a good job that day and be able to leave work at work. And even if we work from home and then separate the work from the home time to feel like, yeah, now I can go out into the second half of my day with my family and feel like I did a good job as a business person, right? As an entrepreneur, as an employee for yourself, for example. But I would really write all of that down. Like, what are my requirements? Like, I'm trying to think, did I get my kid to school and home preferably on time? Yes or no? Like, do I have dinner laid out for my family? Yes or no? Or, at least food that they can feed themselves. I'm going to assume that you're like me and you like to check the boxes also. So like, what are those check boxes in our family life as well as for entrepreneurship? We create those own parameters for ourselves. It sounds like you were maybe a manager, as was I too. So what do we want to manage ourselves? Like, how would we talk to ourselves as an employee? Or I relate it. I borrow from what I have experience doing and relate it into whatever I'm looking at. But like, what are the things what would your annual, like for you, what would your annual review be? Like, tell me, actually, I'm curious, really, what are some examples of what would have been good things for you? What feedback did you want from your husband that you could give to yourself?
I think when I was in the weeds with toddlers, because they're 26 months apart. And we were across country from everyone we knew. And so it was starting out on our own. I think some expectations or parameters, are we eating home cooked food or, foods that are words we could we could pronounce, how many are we eating more not out of a package than in a package? Are they getting outside? Are they connecting with others? I also focus so much on my children, like just making sure that they are happy and healthy and well-rounded. I never paid attention to myself and I rarely paid attention to my spouse. And so I think my annual review would show that I was through the roof on, taking care of our kids, but probably, a nice little on a green, yellow, red scale, I'd probably be about a yellow to even a red on on the relationship aspect with my spouse. And I think, those are things that in hindsight, if I could go back, if I could tell women, in their late 20s, early 30s, starting families, all the things you read are true. It really is important to make sure you have a solid foundation with your spouse. And not that the kids are secondary, but they should be not your primary relationship. And so that's something I would have done differently. I would have definitely, I think that would have also helped my overwhelm and like being burnt out on being a mom of toddlers, is that when it becomes your whole world and it's almost completely out of your control. I mean, there are things you can control with children, and then there are things that are out of your control, like, their behaviors or, their thoughts and feelings on things, their own interests. You can't control human beings. And so, and especially now as they get older and they're teenagers and they're spending more time out of the house, there's even less that you control about your kids. Then you have that connection with your spouse to go back to. And I think that probably would have helped some overwhelm when they were younger, for sure.
Sure. And then I would further break that down to just be like, what is the minimum there? Like, how often do you want to spend time with your spouse and what might that look like? And how can you do that when you have littles, right? Like literally, Scott and I used to go stand in our closet or our bathroom to have a conversation, and Tara would be right on the other side of the door, like right there. And I'm like, well, I can hear her, so she's safe and alive. So we're just going to talk real quick. So it's just like, what does that need to look like,
Yeah, no, for sure. So I think, I would love to continue talking about this, but this could probably be a 3-hour podcast conversation.
Yeah.
If we're not careful. So for women listening to this podcast episode, if they are feeling that this is all resonating with them, or they can connect to parts of it and they're feeling, I'm reaching burnout stage with their career or their families or their life, or they're trying to cope with the overwhelm of all the things that we put on our plates. For a lot of people, life coaching, health coaching, all of the coaching things are an ambiguous job title that they don't really understand how you would serve them. So how do you work with someone if she were thinking, okay, this sounds like something I need help with, but I don't even know where to start. I don't know how coaching works. I don't know how she's going to help me. What would you say to that person?
That's a great question, one I get often, actually. I mean, literally logistically, the best thing to do is really I start doing an assessment with my clients. So they would set up a consultation call, actually. I have a self-scheduled. People can grab any date or time that works for them. And then we just start to talk about it, just like we're doing now. So I actually lean on my medical background also. Like I already said, I already borrow from my past and what I have experience with and use it now. So I do a bit of an assessment. I ask what they're struggling with and where their known struggle points are currently. And then kind of like when you go to the doctor and you do a checklist of like, here's all the signs and symptoms that I'm having. I do a pretty pointed checklist that I talk to them about to get more information for their assessment. And then we'll be able to identify some things that I hear them saying. Usually there's patterns and trends that I pick up on that here's what we would work on together. So I map out a bit of a plan. And if they're interested in implementing that plan and they're interested in doing that with me, I'm happy to map out what the plan would be, whether we work together or not. I'm like, here's the things that I'm hearing that we could work on. This is what it might look like, etc. Or you can take this information and implement it on your own as well. Of course, I'm biased. I like having a life coach and I have my own too, because I find that coaches help us to get the results that we want faster and easier. Plus, as humans, we just don't always see our own stuff. It's really helpful to have someone else reflect back to us what they're seeing or hearing that we're doing to see what's not serving us and where we might want to mitigate some things. So to answer your question of where they would start, I mean, for me specifically, I would say just to book a consultation. But if they're looking about where to start in their own lives on their own, I would say write out a list of the expectations that you have for yourself. And or write out a list of all of the things that are having you feel overwhelmed, all the to-dos that you think you have to do. And then write a list of all the thoughts that you're thinking about why doing those things are important and what are the underlying thoughts that have you feeling like you have to do those things. And just writing them on paper helps you to get more objective, to be able to look at it with a more objective mind and be like, is this really true? Is this really all the things that I have to do? It helps you to separate it so you can see, if it's true or not and what else you'd like to do about it.
Those are great things. And I'm sure that you probably are sitting in your chair right now thinking, this is what she needs to work on. this is what we can, this is what we can,
though. Yeah.
I know.
But it truly is all of us, you know, there's just, oh my gosh. And that's part of why I love coaching is because it's all of us. We all think we're a special, unique flower. Which we are and aren't, right? We are all different and unique, but our problems are so universal. I feel like, so many women are definitely going to be resonating with the things that you and I are talking about today. And I love to help other women because I have been there too. So it's great. It's very fun.
Wonderful. And so then my last question for you that I'm going to ask everyone that comes onto this podcast is, if there was one piece of advice you could give to the next generation of midlifers, or the one suggestion you could make for the next generation of midlifers, what would that be?
To do your best to have grace for yourself. Like everything is going to turn out and be okay. We don't always see it when we're in it. We do feel like the sky is falling and everything is potentially going to be terrible. But if you could just have more reassurance that everything was going to be okay, and within that reassurance, find more grace for yourself. If I could wave my magic wand and bestow that upon everyone, that's what I would do.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It was very fun. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for joining me today. We'll be back next week for another episode of Women Mastering Midlife. Until then, find us on Instagram at Women Mastering Midlife and join my free Facebook community, Women Mastering Midlife, to continue our discussions. If you have any questions that you'd like answered on an Ask Me Anything episode, send your emails to hello@missvictoriabird.com.